This has been going on for 30 years, and everyone in law enforcement, including these leaders I'm about to talk about, they understand there's a problem here. The DOJ does these summary investigations that just give a few examples. In fact, on average, when they do a summary report, and these are all public documents, whether it's Oakland or Seattle or Chicago, these other cities they've been in, they're very vague, right? And they only list 30 or 40 incidents in that department. Well, the pattern and practice guidelines by the DOJ tells you right there's a problem. You know, the DOJ will give you a definition of what a pattern and practice of a civil rights violation is. And the 94 Crime Bill gave the DOJ Civil Rights Division the authority to investigate agencies when they suspect, you know, a pattern or practice. Everybody will acknowledge that when an agency is making millions and millions of contacts, and in Phoenix's example, over the time period the DOJ investigated, and they had gone to over 6 million calls, right? Between 5,000 and 6,000 use of force incidents. So for it to be a pattern in practice, everyone with the brain knows that has to be a pretty standard operating procedure, right? It can't, in fact, the DOJ's own definition, it says it's not, they're not talking about isolated incidents. And it is ironic, the DOJ lists isolated incidents as their example. And everybody's known there's a problem for one reason. Their summary reports are very vague in nature. Like, you can tell they leave a lot of information out. They just sort of give you a few things, and it comes across as a lot of his opinion. But then ultimately, what's the results of these investigations and these consent decrees is complete mayhem, right? I mean, no one's ever going to go on vacation in a department that has had the DOJ run them. Chicago, Seattle, Portland, New Orleans. I mean, I could go on and on. There's not one good success story. In fact, in these cities, crime spikes, staffing goes down, budget implodes. These cost about $10 million a year on average. Seattle has been in this for about 10 years, and they're about $250 million in the hole. Albuquerque has been in it for 10 years, and their violent crime today is 80% higher. The thing the DOJ said they were going to fix, there's too many shootings here. Those have gone up almost 40%, right? So when you look at the metrics, and that's what I do when I look at these things, is I just look at the metrics and the data on the research. And we've never really had the ability to look under the hood, so to speak, Chip, because only one department took the DOJ to court. You either do what the DOJ says, which is let them run your department with these monitors, big time money going on. It's a consent decree, industrial complex, because lots of money, these departments spending lots of money. Or you say, we don't believe this, and the regress is to the federal court. Only one department in 30 years said, nope. And that department took him to court, and the federal judge issued a 240-page ruling that just lambasted that investigation. The DOJ went back to D.C. But it's really ironic. There's a bunch of problems here. The first problem is this is a pretty complicated thing to discuss. I'm just now getting into the foundation of it. Having talked about Phoenix, it's taken a while. And the leaders in these agencies that just believe what the DOJ says when they know it's not accurate, they can read these reports like we can and go, there's some holes in this, but they just agree to it. So it's become a political thing, right? Hasn't been about reforming agencies. It's become political, because if it reformed agencies, then the majority of the most violent cities in America in the top 20 would not be under consent decrees right now. They turn cities into Grand Theft Auto for real. And it's just really terrible. So I have seen this through the years, and I knew something was wrong, like everybody else. And I kept saying, why don't we just take them to court? If you're going to take hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayers, you're going to turn a city into pure chaos, shouldn't you have to prove that in court? Well, nobody but one agency ever did. They just bend over and do it. And the DOJ sort of makes sure that politics are right in those cities. Mainly Democratic cities are what's under these consent decrees. Louisville's a prime example. The Louisville mayor told the DOJ, no, we don't believe this. There's nothing really, we don't see where this is needed. We don't see where there's a good track record of this. They just waited for an election. A new mayor came in, DOJ comes back, and the mayor signs it. And now Louisville signed off on it. And when they actually look at the summary report, they went, this is not, there's no evidence here of this. And DOJ said, sorry, you've already signed up. Welcome to the club, right? And so there's a very sheer lack of transparency. So there's huge problems before the Phoenix investigation. Now, why the Phoenix investigation is important is because for really one of the only times the city council, which is the decision makers, they made this audacious claim to the DOJ. They made they said, listen, we don't have any reason not to believe you, but we would like to see your investigation before we just sign away our city to the federal government, right? So can we see the investigation? Can we see the summary report before we sign anything? The DOJ says no. They say no twice. Well, to anyone with a brain, that tells you all you need to know, right? Well, if this is such a racist police organization and they're breaking all these constitutional violations against citizens, why are you afraid to show us the investigation? The DOJ says that's not how we do it. Sign here, or we'll have to take you to court. Well, the city council sort of held firm, and the DOJ came out with their summary, and their summary jumped the shark, and they didn't do 30 or 40 incidents. They did over 120, and when we get back from break, we'll talk about that. Yeah, so I sort of built the foundation there of this, what we suspected. Something certainly wasn't right. And Phoenix was different. That they didn't just sign it. They said, we'd like to see the evidence. And of course, the DOJ wouldn't show them that. And so the city councilors just didn't make a decision. So what the DOJ did a few months ago was they came out with their summary report. They read it live to the world, and they made Phoenix to be one of the worst departments. When you listen to this, it sounds horrific. They hit them with how they treated homeless. They hit them with use of force. They hit them with racial profiling, how they treat the youth. By the way, how they treat the youth, they listed 3 examples on how they treat the youth. That's pattern and practice, sure. And so even though they had over 120 incidents, I would just say right there on its surface, 6 million calls, 5,000 to 6,000 use of force, 120 incidents. If those were questionable in itself, you have a very difficult time proving a pattern and practice, especially when throughout those incidents, they were actually using times when officers were being disciplined. They used an instance where an officer used force and was terminated. So the department's doing their job, right? So very strange, but the city did something very unique. And for the first time, we were able to go beyond the flawed summary of the DOJ and actually look at the incidents. They put a public website up, dojrecords.phoenix.gov. And see, the DOJ doesn't identify the incidents. So you can imagine out of 6 million calls, when they list 120 some odd incidents, that takes a pretty big lift to go, what incident are they talking about? I mean, sometimes they list the dates, so you can sort of figure it out. But they went in and the city identified the vast majority of these incidents. And they put a website up and they put what the DOJ said on this side of the website. And on the other side of the website, they put the reports, the administrative documents, and the body camera footage. So for the first time, now this is what would happen in a federal court, by the way, right? You would get to examine each of these incidents. But once again, only one department's ever done that, and they beat the DOJ soundly because of these faulty investigations. Because if you're going to say the things the DOJ says about a department, you better bring receipts, right? And so I had the opportunity, because of this website, to go in and examine each incident versus what the DOJ said. Now, let me backtrack. Why am I doing this? Why isn't the leadership of other agencies doing this? Why isn't other police organizations doing this? But I'm the one doing this because no one else seems to be doing it. The media didn't care about it. Nobody's doing this. And so I didn't know what I expected to see, Chip. I personally expected, I know law enforcement is a human performance business. We make mistakes, things happen. I expected in these incidents, we'd probably see some things that shouldn't have happened. I'm looking to see what the department's doing when things happen like this. And I started off with the use of force incidents. There were 36 incidents the DOJ used to say that their use of force is a pattern and practice of unconstitutional policing. And man, I got to tell you, I was shocked at what I found. I not only didn't find any incident that was unconstitutional, I found heroic actions. They were using videos that every police agency should be using on what to do. It blew my mind that this is what they're using. I mean, they used incidents where we were saving people's lives. And so after I got through with that section, I realized how the DOJ has been able to do this across the country. What they did in their narrative is they didn't talk about any of the details that have to be known to determine whether force was constitutional. What type of crime's happening, what the behavior is doing. They don't list any of that in the narrative. They basically just say, on this date and time, officers shot a man and it was unconstitutional. That was really as simple as it got. But when you look at it, like they used, one example comes to mind. They said a man was just suffering a behavioral crisis in his car and he was crying. And officers yanked him out of the car, put him in a neck restraint, and handcuffed him. That's what the DOJ said in a nutshell. You can go to this report and see it yourself. When you watch the video, 911 call comes in. He's trying to kidnap a woman. He actually drags a woman 7 feet towards a car. As the woman's getting away, he says, I have a knife and I'm going to kill myself. So that's the information the officers have when they approach him. It wasn't some mental health call. He may have been mentally ill, but that wasn't the call. And the DOJ made a big deal about they didn't take him to get help. They just used his, well, he's committed a felony alleged kidnapping crime. We're beyond help at that point. And so when the police go up to him, they literally ask him a dozen times, get out of the car, get out. He doesn't. They go inside the car to try to handcuff him. The fight's on. It was a violent fight for a couple of minutes before they get him into custody. He's not harmed, but he's certainly taken to jail for kidnapping and a bunch of other things. That is not even mentioned. And that was in every single incident I saw. So that's how they're able to do that. And that to me blows my mind. The only way you would do that in an investigation, Chip, is you think nobody's going to ever be able to catch you. That's right. Because it was so outrageous. And of course, for 30 years, only one department's taken them to court, so they have to be expecting no one's going to ever know we did this. And by the way, they had to do it on purpose. For you to claim force is unconstitutional and for you to leave all those facts out, you're doing that intently to try to tell a story to that community. Well, then I get into the homelessness section. So that's how they did the deadly force section, is they leave all the facts out. And the homelessness section was even more simpler. So Phoenix, like every other big city, they're battling an issue with unsheltered people. You got community people upset. You got businesses upset, and they're trying to balance this right. And so the DOJ starts off with saying the city of Phoenix uses city ordinances to arrest or cite homeless people when they're committing the crime, but that's unconstitutional because the city ordinances are unconstitutional. Well, before we go to break, guess who gets to decide the constitutionalness of a law? Here's a tip. It's not the DOJ. It's the courts. And they didn't ignore the Grants Pass case that just said, yeah, cities can have ordinances that even if they disproportionately affect homeless people, they're still legal ordinances. They didn't ignore that, but they said this in quote, despite what the Supreme Court says. We're getting close to the end, but it gets crazier.
All right, it's getting good. It's already crazy. All right, commercial break. We'll be right back. All right, guys, are you struggling with the ins and outs of warrantless searches and seizures, or are you worried about the liability in case you get it wrong? Say hello to bluetogold.com. They translate search and seizure doctrines into clear, straightforward concepts that any officer can relate to, plus to give the training for free thanks to bluetogold.com's free weekly webinars. Now, September the 4th, this week, drones, LPRs, and pole cams is what they're training about. Sign up at bluetogold.com today and join thousands of your peers in blue and step up your legal game because, frankly, you and your agency cannot afford not to. Again, that is bluetogold.com. Now let's talk about AFIRE. It stands for Accuracy Under Fire, and it's at AFIRE.com. And now agencies can safely prepare their leaders for the mental challenges associated with being wounded on duty, forcing them to adapt, problem solve, refocus, and overcome to effectively neutralize the threat. Now, AFIRE.com, it has the only option to safely prepare leaders for the instant, intense, random, and distracting immobilization of a body part that is associated with a debilitating wound. Go to AFIRE.com. Watch these amazing videos. Learn about this fantastic product, afire.com. All right, guys. Wow. That's pretty motivational there, Travis. And we are about 4 minutes away from coming back to the radio portion of the show. But wow.
Well,
wow.
Keep the audience, keep this in mind. So this may come up during the live show, but I did this research document that's literally factual. Here's what they said. Here's what the incident was. Very factual. And one particular media outlet there in Phoenix, because the DOJ uses the media to try to get public opinion their way. Shocker, I know. Is they had to report on the document because they would look like fools don't, but they don't say what the document says. All they had to say was Travis Yates is a controversial figure. That's what they said, and they attacked me. And keep this in mind by saying that it's not controversial that the head of the DOJ that read this document out loud was admitted to commit perjury in front of Congress during her hearings. That's not controversial. It's not controversial that the DOJ report was written by nameless people. We don't know who wrote that report. We don't know who the researchers are. That's not controversial. It's not controversial that the DOJ said, despite what the Supreme Court said, We're the gods here. That's not controversial. It's not. So none of that seems to matter to the media because they're trying to tell a story in conjunction with this report. Let me tell you, it's scandalous, but what's more scandalous is nobody's talking about it. I cannot believe what I saw. I mean, I have lost. I mean, it is troublesome. We see the news, Chip, deep state, this and that. When you see this in black and white, what they have done to local law enforcement, because if they did this to Phoenix, I can assure you it's been done to other agencies. And then Roland Fryer, peer-reviewed research, Harvard professor, a legitimate dude, he did a research study that said more people are dying in consent decree cities because of consent decrees. I mean, so this to me, the fact that if you're going to say what you're saying about law enforcement and you have literally, they haven't had one case. I haven't seen one case. There's not one thing in that document that leads to this.
That's accurate.
They didn't even try. And you know what their response was? They did a public meeting on Zoom last week, probably in response to some of this, right? Because this has never happened to them. You have to keep that in mind. I don't want to be the one doing it. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to get audited. I don't want to be the one doing it. Somebody asked him about my document. You know what they said? You know what their complaint? You know what they said? Well, you just need to know. We have other cases that we know of. Well, where is it?
And that's it.
That's it. What are you talking? It's not in the report. What do you mean you have other cases? So they're really putting the pressure on Phoenix because they're very concerned that because this is a major city. It's Democratic leaning. This was a lock for them. They're going to get to take over another big city for the next 20 years. And they are seeing this dwindling. And I got to give the city council credit. They have stood firm when most of them politically don't align with myself, but they hopefully are understanding what this could do to their city. And Ruben Gallegos, who's running for Senate, who's a Democratic congressman right now, and he's not exactly in the middle of the road. He's very progressive. He just came out against the DOJ consent decree.
Well, I just got an alert from Daily Wire saying that the Covenant shooter's entire diary has been published. And so that should be interesting. It says it reveals obsession with white privilege and transgenderism, but it does not contain a detailed plan of the shooting. But I can't wait to dive into that for tomorrow's show.
Transparency shines a light on all this. The fact they tried to hide that tells you what you need to know. And it's the same thing with this. The fact that everything is so secretive tells you what you need to know. And Randy, I'm going to open this up to you in a minute. I'm going to be done in a second, but
we're halfway through, so we gotta get moving through a lot of other topics. So let's wrap this up quickly, and then I also want to have a call to action, so people want to get involved and help post on this thing. I'm thinking LinkedIn might be the best one, but you'll tell us in a second here. But 5 seconds. Here we go.
Listen, it is very troubling, but think about this. You've got an entity talking about constitutional policing, Chip. They don't understand Terry v. Ohio. They don't understand Graham v. Connor. I mean, it was clear in there they're misrepresenting all of these cases to come to their conclusion. Just the fact that they claim that these local ordinances are unconstitutional. Well, first off, if you think they're unconstitutional, why haven't you filed a lawsuit against the local ordinances? You haven't because you know they aren't. And then secondly, the court, you don't get to decide that. The courts do. So the cops are doing the best they can to deal with this huge issue like most cities have. They're using local ordinances to do it. In fact, most of the videos they're giving the citizens, they're not even writing citations. They're just saying, you got to move along. They're breaking the law, move along. They're just trying to deal with it the way the best they can. While the story the DOJ is trying to tell is that they're targeting all these people. And by the way, I'm not completely through with the document, but what I've looked at, that pattern remains the same. And it's very troubling that this has happened.